Here is the Hull-Paragon interchange, originally opened in 1848 to serve the York and North Midland Railway, and containing the station hotel. After a stay by Queen Victoria in 1851, it became the Royal Station Hotel. Today it is the Royal. On the concourse is a Martin Jennings statue of a hurrying and bespectacled Eric Morecambe lookalike. This is the poet and jazz enthusiast Philip Larkin. Hull's Paragon Station was its chosen site, as it was the departure point for many of his trips with his bicycle into the local countryside. Larkin died in 1985, and as part of the 25th anniversary of his death, the Larkin statue was commissioned to honour his connections with the city of Hull. Unveiled in 2010, the bronze statue stands 7 feet tall and portrays the poet in motion, with a manuscript tucked under his arm and clutching a trilby hat whilst rushing for the train. It is based on the opening line of his poem The Whitsun Weddings, in which he wrote, "I was late getting away." Also in 2010, the Larkin Trail was created. At 25 sites associated with him, plaques were designed and placed to reflect his life and poetry. It gives one an opportunity to explore the sights of Hull and its surroundings, with Larkin's writings in mind. One trail sign is found on a wall by the statue. It reflects on the importance of the railways to him. We raced across bright knots of rail. And when your train comes to rest in Paragon Station against a row of docile buffers, you alight with an end-of-the-line sense of freedom. Arriving in war-damaged Hull in the 50s, the city was growing from the ruins. Larkin came as chief librarian at the university and stayed for 30 years till his death. In that time, he became England's foremost post-war poet. He was a regular visitor to the Station Hotel and in 1966 wrote "Friday Night at the Royal Station Hotel." Hours pass and all the salesmen have gone back to Leeds, leaving full ashtrays in the conference room. From the Royal, we can look across Ferrons Way and see the modernist buildings that house the department stores he visited. But Hull is a city of contrasts, and Larkin also sees domes and statues, spires and cranes cluster. After work, he attended concerts, both classical and jazz, at the City Hall. A plaque outside reflects this interest, taking lines from the end of the poem broadcast. He describes his muse, Maeve Brennan, at a concert. Your hands, tiny in all that air, applauding. Pubs and jazz feature strongly in Larkin's life, and Ye Old Black Boy in the High Street was a favourite pub. Larkin had bought his first jazz record and a drum kit in the 1930s. He continued an avid fan throughout his life. The Hull Jazz Record Society met in the White Hart, and inevitably he was a regular. Listening to new jazz records for an hour with a pint of gin and tonic is the best remedy for a day's work I know. A visit to Worship Street takes you to the Hull History Centre, where the Larkin archive is stored. The sign is found on the front corner of the building, reading, "This is the paper he wrote on. These are the words as he wrote them, emerging for the first time in this particular miraculous combination." In the public space to the rear, you can see Toad in the Hull. Originally there were 25 toads designed for the 25th anniversary of his death. The toad is associated with Larkin. He sees work as the toad that squats on his life. The sign at Victoria Pier identifies the city spread alongside water. This was the old ferry crossing point, much used before the advent of the Humber Bridge. For his first year in Hull, he lived in bedsits in Cottingham. Bed, upright chair, 60-watt bulb, no hook behind the door, no room for books or bags. I'll take it. For the next 18 years he rented a university-owned attic flat at 32 Pearson Park. Pearson Park is often the venue for Larkin-related events. When that was sold, he bought a house just a short cycle ride from the university library at 105 Newland Park. Here we see another toad, reminding us of the house's links with Larkin. Next we see the West Gateway at the Springbank Cemeteries. Larkin would often walk through them, taking photographs. Memorably, he told John Betjeman in a BBC Monitor programme that when I come here on a wet Sunday afternoon in December, when it isn't at all romantic, it gets my worries into perspective. It was in 1955 that his anthology The Less Deceived was published. This was his breakthrough publication. It was produced at 253 Hull Road, Hessel, by the Marvel Press, a small concern run by George and Jean Hartley from their terraced home. Larkin became friends with the family and would often take walks on the Hessel foreshore with them. This would have been before the building of the Humber Bridge. The Hessel foreshore became the site of the Humber Bridge, and the Larkin Trail sign is on the North Tower. Jean's Walk, this refers to Jean Hartley. Later he described the arrival of the bridge as the rise of one plain line, a giant step forever to include all our dear landscape in a new design. West of Hull, beside the river, is Blacktoft, and on the gable wall of the old schoolhouse the Larkin Trail sign reminds us of his weekend cycle trips. Swerving through fields, too thin and thistled to be called meadows. Swerving to solitude of skies and scarecrows, haystacks, hares and pheasants, and the ever-widening river's presence. Often, on a Sunday, after cycling in the surrounding countryside, Larkin would have afternoon tea at the Beverley Arms Hotel. In 1980, he and John Weeks, a sound engineer colleague, made recordings of some of his poetry. The result was Sunday Sessions. Undoubtedly, he would have visited the church opposite the Beverley Arms and also the magnificent Beverley Minster. Larkin appreciated churches and their architecture. He would take time to enter the church and the churchyard, as in Church Going, one of his most memorable poems. Once I'm sure there's nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. Hatless, I take off my cycle clips in awkward reverence. The impressive spire of St. Patrick's, the Queen of Holderness, stands above the flat landscape between Hull and the North Sea. Larkin would have cycled this very road as he headed out from Patrington to Spurn Head. Ends the land sudden, beyond a beach of shapes and shingle, here is unfenced existence, facing the sun, untalkative, out of reach. Probably his most well-known poem is This Be the Verse. Never a parent himself, this verse reflects his views on his own parents. They fuck you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. Larkin never married. He chose not to, yet he could still be envious. In Annus Mirabilis, he muses, sexual intercourse began in 1963, which was rather late for me, between the end of the Chatterley Band and the Beatles' first LP. He died in 1985. His reputed last words were, I'm going to the inevitable.